Okay, good morning, everyone. Welcome to TeleShadowing. We're live on YouTube. Please feel free to ask any questions in the chat box as we go along, and they will be addressed. I'm honored to introduce our mentor and guest speaker, Dr. Raul Mirza. Dr. Mirza is a dedicated and highly accomplished physician specializing in both public health and occupational medicine. He currently serves as the Director of Clinical Public Health and Epidemiology at the United States Army Public Health Center, where he works to safeguard and improve the health of our service members and communities. In addition to his leadership role, Dr. Mirza is adjunct faculty for the Occupational Medicine residency at the Uniformed Services University of Health Sciences, helping train and mentor the next generation of preventive medicine physicians. He's also deeply involved with the American College of Occupational and Environmental Medicine, holding positions on its board of directors, serving as treasurer, and chairing the upcoming 2025 American Occupational Health Conference. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to Dr. Mirza. Thank you.
And Amna, thank you very much for that introduction. Good morning, everyone. It's certainly a pleasure to see you this morning, and thanks again to the University of Maryland for hosting and for the invitation. This is my first time providing a presentation in this format about who I am and what I do. So this is very cool. I would absolutely love questions as we go along. Feel free to ask me questions, even during the presentation for any sort of clarification. What I thought I would do this morning is provide an overview of my career path in terms of how I ended where I am today professionally, with the understanding that many of you are getting ready to embark on similar journeys within your own professions, whether you are thinking about medical school currently in undergrad, perhaps you are getting ready to start medical school or early on, or just interested in learning about this medical specialty, which is occupational environmental medicine. So I hope you glean something from my experiences. And if you have any questions now or at conclusion of this presentation, feel free to reach out to me. I will provide you my personal email address. I'm always happy to take questions over email and the like. So I just want a confirmation that you can see my screen. Yes, okay. So just to tell you a little bit about myself, I am a board certified physician in general public health and in preventive medicine. And I am also board certified in occupational and environmental medicine. My email is there on the screen for you. Just tell you a little bit about myself. So I'm originally from South Florida, from Miami. I went to undergrad at the University of Central Florida, where I majored in biology and molecular biology. And following that, I went to Barry University in Miami for a master's degree in biomedical science, where at the time I was really focused and interested in pursuing a career in proteomics, becoming an academician and researcher at a university. So I went through this 2 years master's program, in which during that time I was really fortunate to embark in a National Institute of Health grant and go to Italy for a few months in Naples, working at a marine institute. And that's where you see this photo of me here on the bottom left-hand corner. I was working here on pipetting, but much of the work that I was embarking on was using high pressure liquid chromatography, assessing of all things the aphrodisiacal properties of oysters and clams and shellfish that were native to the Mediterranean Bay there in Naples. So spent a few months there, and I learned something about myself that I had not expected, and that was that as much as I enjoyed the science and as much as I enjoyed the laboratory work, I felt it was a pretty isolating field for me. And so I began to think about what it is that I can do to apply my science interests, and that's where medicine arose. I enjoy very much interactions with other individuals, and before going into medicine and starting my degrees, I worked at a financial institution. Many of you may know them, Chase Bank, for about 7 years, where I really enjoyed, intimate engagement with clients, talking about their personal finances and helping them along the way. And I thought, well, why not marry that with science and go into medicine, where you develop personal relationships with your patients, and help them in their life journey as it relates to their health. And then at that point, um, I decided very quickly, and very late in my graduate program, to pursue medicine. So at that time, uh, I was about 5 months away from graduating from grad school, and I took the MCAT, and thankfully I did well enough to be accepted into a couple of medical school programs, um, as a very late acceptance. And so ultimately, I ended up going to the Virginia College of Osteopathic Medicine. I am a doctor of osteopathy, a DO. A DO is one of two medical professions in the United States. We divide them between osteopathic and allopathic medicine, and both comprise 4 years of medical curricula at the present. And so I went to the Virginia College of Osteopathic Medicine, and here the picture on the lower right is a picture of me and my best friend there. This is our white coat ceremony in the first year of med school. So for many of you who embark in this career, when you enter medical school, there will be a point in time where you're given the white coat and you get to don that, and there's a ceremony that goes along with that, and it's a elevating experience that makes you recognize really where you are headed in your career and the trajectory that you really are on. Another thing I would tell this group of aspiring physicians and other clinicians is that uh, it's hard to see what is the outcome when you're in the thick of it. When you are in training, you're focused on training, it seems, and schooling, and it seems like it will never end. Seems like you'll never be done. Um, and I look back at that photo in particular and think to myself, wow, time goes by quick. And the other takeaway is that as you're maneuvering through your training, uh, you may find internal conflict in that you may desire to make changes about what medical specialties you are interested in. There may you may have a setback in your training, but it all resolves itself eventually. And I think the point is here that we oftentimes ascribe to a specific timeline. We have a thought that med school is 4 years. At the end of year one, I take my step one. At my end of year two, I take step one. End of year three, I take step two. By the end of year three, I should know what medical specialty I want to be in, and I'm locked into that. It's not as draconian or as we seem to think it is. So allow yourself some flexibility if you need to take part on it. Once you're in medical school, my perspective is that the school, the instructors, your mentors, the educators, they will work very hard to see that you succeed. They will be there to help you along the way. And medical school is not hard. You would not have been accepted if it was too hard for you. Medical school is like grad school or it's like undergrad. It's just that the volume of information that you're taking in is pretty voluminous relative to the period of time in which you're taking it in. So for any of you that have preoccupations on that, hopefully that insight helps you a little bit. So when I was in med school, I decided at that time that I was going to pursue a health profession scholarship through the military. That is something that I had not given thought to before entering medical school. Now, that's not the typical situation for many pre-med students or med students. Oftentimes, folks who go to undergrad may engage in a ROTC program with the military service and get a scholarship through undergrad, and then pursue a health profession scholarship or go directly to the Uniformed Services University for medical school. But for folks like myself that went into medical school without really recognizing this as a potential opportunity, I applied to this scholarship program to join the military, and I ended up with a 3-year scholarship and ultimately decided on the Department of the Army as the military service that I wanted to join. What I will say for those of you that have never considered this, that may think about this after this talk about the military and getting your medical training, I would offer that the medical training and the experiences, some of which I'll share here, are really are unique and are exciting experiences that you will likely not partake in anywhere else in your formative postgraduate training. So I graduated from the Virginia Tech Osteopathic School, quickly went into the Army, to Walter Reed Army Medical Center in Washington, D.C. at the time, and started my internship. It was a transitional year internship. At the time, I had been selected to go into dermatology. And so in the course of that year, having done heavy electives again in dermatology at the time, I recognized that that may not be the medical specialty that that had the interest for me as I had once thought. And so I made a decision to change my medical specialty into another, which I thought more aligned with my professional interests, and that was general public health and preventive medicine. And the prevailing reason why is that I have a personal interest in health policy and health administration. And if you have any familiarity with any of the public health medical fields, there is much work steeped in the generation of health policy, standard guidance, practices, and so there seemed to be a good alignment. So I did my preventive medicine residency with the Army, and still I did not know what was occupational medicine. So many of you are going to hear me talk about occupational medicine in just a couple minutes, and this will be your first time hearing about it. At this point, I had gone through undergrad, grad school, medical school, internship, started a residency, and had no knowledge of what was occupational medicine. And so when I completed my preventive medicine residency, the Army had in its training requirements for preventive medicine docs that they also do a residency in occupational medicine. And at that point, that's when I became very familiar with what was occupational medicine. So in my training, it was a conjoined program. You do 1 year of internship. You then go and complete a master's of public health. I did my preventive medicine clinical year. And then I did the occupational environmental medicine clinical year after that. And then by the time you're done, you're board eligible for both preventive medicine and occupational medicine. And that's the route I took. The year between, or rather the year overlapping preventive medicine and occupational medicine, I also did a policy studies fellowship, non-clinical fellowship. It's an academic fellowship. It's 1 year at the New York Institute of Technology, along with the American Osteopathic Association, which I thought also really primed me well for the type of roles that I would take on in the Department of Defense. So just to kind of give you an idea of what I've done, here on the upper left-hand corner, it's a picture of a family outside their home that is built in the middle of the Amazon River, and this is taken in Iquitos, Peru. Iquitos, Peru is just one of 4 locations where during my training and residency, I was able to engage in public health activities with the Ministry of Health that we have, or that exists in these host nations. But it's also a testament to the experiences that are available in some of these public health rotations. Other places I've been to include Honduras and Tbilisi, Georgia, and so these are very unique to us. You may not know the Department of Defense does have medical research laboratories across the world. This includes in nations where we are engaged in humanitarian host and nation building efforts, but also they also include locations where we may have a large presence, military presence, and so we work within the region to identify and understand better the management of disease that is local to that area, so that we're better prepared to take care of military personnel. So a lot of research, academic research work that goes on in the medical field within the Department of Defense. About a year and a half after I graduated from residency, I was deployed to Afghanistan for approximately 10 months. There I served as a preventive medicine officer and a subject matter expert in occupational medicine for both U.S. forces and the NATO Security Assistance Force that was there at the time. A wonderful experience. A couple photos here in the top center. That's me in a Black Hawk helicopter. That was a routine experience traveling across Afghanistan at the various NATO and U.S. bases that we had there at the time. The photo next to that one on the right, second from the right. This is a photo of myself and a colleague working and meeting with a Korean delegation, South Korean delegation, who was implementing and delivering services on a humanitarian basis for pediatric patients in Afghanistan. Afghanistan is a country where poverty and access to nutrition is challenging, and as a consequence, there are many congenital diseases and ailments that young people and children and infants suffer. And so the Koreans and NATO and US medical personnel would volunteer at this hospital, not only to maintain skill sets, but also to gain exposure to some congenital problems that we read about in textbooks, but we don't necessarily see in the United States. And so that was that. One of the highlights of my career in the upper right-hand corner, President Barack Obama came to Afghanistan to visit the troops over the Memorial Day weekend. And I was assigned to be one of the medical personnel for his care in the event that something would go down. And so that was a really interesting experience, one that I would never had expected for myself at any point in time previously. Uh, in the in the bottom left-hand corner, it's myself and a staff sergeant in the Army. We were conducting a contact investigation for tuberculosis. We had an Afghani contractor who was also a commercial driver who was living with active tuberculosis and therefore as a contract driver going between bases had potentially exposed several individuals to the disease. And so we were working to kind of trace the steps, identify individuals who had come in contact and assure that there was no significant risk of disease in those individuals. I left the Army in 2016 and became a Department of Defense civilian, where I now work as the Chief of Occupational Environmental Medicine for the Defense Health Agency Public Health, specifically a center that's located in Aberdeen, Maryland. And in that role, I oversee programs and services that in part provide clinical consultation to more than 200 occupational health clinics that are located worldwide, to the staff that work there. Also working on various retrospective exposure-based investigations where we look at the health outcomes or health effects of deployment and environmental exposures. And so in this very unique role that I have been asked to go to Capitol Hill and testify before the Senate Armed Services Committee and the House Armed Services Committee about various topics. Some of these include the environmental exposures relative to the provisions in a recent piece of legislation a couple of years ago that's called the PACT Act. I've also testified on the medical management of individuals who had been exposed to toxic metals, what is the medical management, and how should that be delivered and programmed in the VA. I've also sat on various panels with individuals with far furthering influence on military and VA health system matters. And so the picture on the bottom right is a photo of myself with Miss Rosie Torres. She and her husband started a nonprofit foundation which advocates very strongly for individuals who were exposed to airborne hazards from specifically burn pit emissions that were used throughout the Middle East. Also there in the photo, second from the right, is Dr. Sharif El Nahal. And then to the right is Dr. David Shulkin, both Undersecretary of the VA, and then Dr. Shulkin was the Secretary of the VA back during the Obama administration. So a couple other things as a provider that I engage in. I work as an independent contractor for veteran evaluation services, where I conduct medical examinations for conditions in which a veteran claims is associated with their service. And decisions that follow those examinations is what enables some veterans to uh, get into the VA healthcare system for medical care, but also receive compensation commensurate for the medical condition in which they are living with. Another highlight for me professionally also includes having worked over 10 years at Women Walker Health. That is a clinic in downtown DC that focuses much on uh, sexual transmitted infections. And so I have an interest in that part of medicine. I also hold an interest in tropical and infectious disease. So that's a little bit of my career trajectory there. But what I want to do is now um, share with you a little bit about occupational health and part of this from a lens of where how we view it in the Department of Defense. So I don't know how many of you have heard of an occupational health program. Uh, Occupational health programs essentially touch the lives of all working individuals across the world, whether they realize it or not. And many of these programs, particularly in the United States, are legislated, have government entities which provide specific requirements for these programs. And many of these program requirements are enforceable, meaning that there is a method of accountability on employers to ensure that they are promoting services to their employees who require them in order to maintain their health and safety while at work. So occupational health professionals, they are the leading experts in the interplay of factors that affect health in the workplace. And the diagram on the right-hand side shows in the center occupational health and safety, but also all around there are the various disciplines and professions that support an occupational health program. So these include safety personnel, industrial hygienists, environmental health specialists, human resources, the elements of the employer, such as supervisors. We have attorneys, particularly those who have a focus in employee law or labor law. There are programs throughout the country which are called employee assistance programs. Most of the larger organizations do have this type of program that connects workers to ancillary services for issues that affect potentially their work and their home environments. Substance abuse programs, security, and then you have the clinical programs. Here in the Army, we have, or in the Department of Defense, we have broken them down between occupational medicine and environmental medicine, although occupational and environmental medicine really are one singular specialty recognized by the American Board of Preventive Medicine. So all of this to say that unlike other areas of medicine, occupational and environmental medicine provides a very important function in an overall occupational health and safety program. And so in many ways, unlike other medical specialties that are involved in providing direct patient care, occupational medicine really serves the employer in assuring that the employer is compliant with statutory requirements that govern the delivery of safety and occupational health program services, and in part also serves the employee, particularly if they become injured by the job or on the job, or develop a work-related illness, where these medical specialists will conduct the typical paradigm of medical management and evaluation of these individuals. So occupational environmental medicine is a unique medical specialty. Again, it's under the American Board of Preventive Medicine. And unlike most of the other medical specialties, what you notice is that occupational medicine is not focused solely on an organ system. For example, cardiology, pulmonology, allergy and immunology, dermatology. These are all focused on specific organ systems. Occupational medicine is focused on a group of individuals. One might say that pediatrics is similar, or geriatrics is similar, where the medicine that is delivered and the focus of the specialty is on a subset group of individuals in the population with unique needs. Unique medical needs or healthcare needs. And so as a result, occupational and environmental medicine specialists really require to have a very broad understanding of medicine within several different specialties. And these are all enumerated here in the diagram around occupational environmental medicine. And so when we think about work-related hazards that an employee may generate while working in their regular production processes, or agents that they're working with, or hazardous agents that are in the environment in which they work. The impact of all those hazards can be varied depending on the toxicology of that agent, and therefore organ systems may be invariably impacted depending on what is that agent. And so having an understanding of derm, how to manage derm issues such as contact dermatitis, or individuals who are working with biological agents and then are exposed and potentially infected subsequent to that, knowing how to manage those cases. Individuals that are exposed to certain types of metals, who may be at risk for cancer, or fibers such as asbestos, which is known to cause mesothelioma, a very difficult cancer to treat of the lungs. And so these medical specialists, they work for a very specific cohort, which is the working people, but they have a very broad knowledge base, which they apply to their work to be able to take care of the health needs and concerns of these workers relative to what they're exposed to. So OEM specialists have two broad functions overall. These include monitoring individuals who are working in environments or in the course of their work in which hazards may impact their health. The second major function of occupational health professionals is assuring that an individual has the medical and physical fitness required to perform the essential job functions of whatever job that they are in. And these jobs can span a variety of fields, everything from healthcare workers to educators to police and firefighters to pilots to astronauts to laboratory workers, all who may be exposed to or involved with chemical, biological, radiological hazards, for example. And so these medical specialists work to detect preclinical disease in individuals exposed to hazardous substances, and then work with the occupational health program partners to prevent or mitigate further insult of those exposures to the workers. But there are 10 core competencies overall for occupational environmental medicine providers. And these include clinical occupational environmental medicine, essentially the occupational considerations which serve as risk factors that can incite disease or injury in individuals. Occupational environmental medicine related laws and regulations. The medical specialty in part delivers programs and health services that also meet requirements that are steeped in federal law or state law or corporate policy and guidance. And so OEM professionals have to learn in their formative training, particularly for in the United States, the standards promulgated by the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, or OSHA. What are the medical requirements on employers in terms of what health services must be delivered to their employees in these safety and occupational health programs? But there are other agencies as well. There's the Mining Safety Health Administration, there's a Federal Railroad Administration, there is the Department of Transportation, and then there's other ancillary agencies within the United States government, such as the National Institute for Safety and Occupational Health that promulgates best practices, and then also the Environmental Protection Agency, which also has a minor enforcement and also research and best practice function as well. And so these OEM providers in their academic work learn about health systems and national policies that guide some conduct of health delivery within an occupational environmental medicine clinic. Environmental health falls very closely in line with these competencies. These providers also work within the field of fitness and disability. So if an individual becomes injured on the job, these OEM providers are trained specifically to medically manage those injuries with the hopeful intent that those injured workers or those infirmed workers can be medically remediated and brought back into the workplace. Aside, these providers are trained in their ability to assess physical and psychological impairments and the potential ramifications of those impairments on that individual's ability to perform their job duties and help facilitate communications between the employee and the employer as well. Toxicology is a significant core competency area, as I've talked about a little bit already, that we have workers in the workforce, particularly in industrial and production settings and emergency response settings, in which these workers are exposed to some potentially health hazardous substances. And so having a thorough understanding of toxicology, how these substances come into the body, how they interact with us physiologically, and ultimately what pathologic processes may arise as a consequence of that exposure is germane to how we practice our medicine. Hazard recognition, evaluation, and control. This is what I consider to be the public health component of the medical specialty. Disaster preparedness and emergency management is another one. A notable example of this, particularly one that most of us, all of us have lived through in various ways, is the recent COVID-19 pandemic, in which the disaster was an infectious disease that was killing hundreds of thousands of individuals across the world. And so how do how do you attenuate uh, the propagation of that illness through populations, and still be able to conduct regular activities that are essential and critical. And then how do you respond and recover? This is all part of emergency preparedness and management. Uh, Health and productivity. A lot of this has to do with health promotion and education programs, employee health programs. So although the essential function of employers is to keep workers safe from the potential harms that may arise on the job, and there's also a recognition that it is indeed an interest of employers to make their employees or help make their employees healthier than perhaps they were when they entered their job role. And so many employers are recognizing that there are administrative and medical provisions that can aid in better health and workers. And so occupational and environmental medicine specialists are typically in the forefront of, of, of leading many of these types of efforts for their respective organizations. The other public health piece is surveillance and disease prevention. So we work with industrial hygiene and environmental engineers who assess hazards in workplaces and environments, and we work with them to have an understanding of what are those hazards so that we can individually survey personnel and detect preclinical disease. And then based on what outcomes we identify in our surveillance, we use that information to change or improve work site controls so that we prevent or mitigate the risk of potential exposure and health harm to workers. Excuse me. And then lastly, occupational and environmental medicine related management and administration. So as I've alluded to in the talk, occupational environmental medicine is a medical specialty. However, it's also a medical specialty steeped in statutory requirements and regulations. And this then requires for occupational environmental medicine specialists to have a good understanding of the administrative management of programs. So how one delivers the program so that it's compliant with law, how one delivers a program so it's adherent to best practices, clinical practices, and how one assures compliance, how one conducts evaluation of their programs, develops metrics, and the like. So it's a whole programmatic approach in the management administration that is not typical of the type of training that would involve other medical specialists, such as in primary care, to include internal medicine or surgery and the like. This is really a business aspect, if you will, administrative aspect of the specialty. So here, this chart is an overview based for the differences between what we call in the Department of Defense direct care versus occupational medicine. And so I'm just going to call out a few distinctions because I think sometimes it is a challenge, not only for individuals who are a novice in occupational environmental medicine, but also for other healthcare providers and specialists who don't work in occupational environmental medicine to understand really what are the distinctions and relationships that exist between a patient versus a worker, the employer, the physician, or the clinician, and the interplay of expectations. So Um, to describe this in general terms, for direct care and healthcare services, it's usually a mission that's oriented to the the identification, assessment, and medical management of injury of individuals living with illness or acutely ill. So those with chronic health conditions, those who develop an upper respiratory infection, those who need surgery, that the traditional form of care, um, healthcare systems are in the business of delivering that care. um, Occupy and they do so for the patients for whom they serve. Occupational health care, or occupational medicine really arises as a unique medical specialty, in part because there are so many legal requirements and responsibilities that are placed on employers to ensure the safety and health of their employees. So although um, part of the medical services we provide are to help in the medical management of folks that develop occupational environmental health illnesses and injuries. The other component of what we do using clinical skills and practices is to assure that folks are not injured on the job as an insurance program for employers to meet their statutory compliance for safety and occupational health. Another component that I'll split here is, the business motive for occupational medicine versus other areas of healthcare. So, in regular medicine or direct care, typically there is a profit component associated with that, so that there could be continuance of services made available to the populations whom the medical center serves. In occupational medicine, while they may generate uh, relative value units, uh, it's specifically not the purpose of these clinics. These clinics essentially um, provide a service that is notably the cost of doing business for an employer. It's similar to the notion of a municipality that has to resource emergency response and law enforcement, because it's the cost of assuring public health and safety in that municipality. So similarly for employers, the the benefit of good occupational health programs is that you maintain a productive workforce, a workforce that maintains their ability to do their job. And so in part, it's an investment right back into the organization to assure that whatever are the organizational goals and missions are sustained. And so that's a little difference between occupational medicine in relationship to the people who are served. So notably, occupational medicine providers, the customer really is the employer, whereas in direct care and direct medicine, the customer is a patient. And so therefore in direct care and traditional medicine, there are patient-physician relationships, and you will hear about those throughout your career, particularly in your training. But in an occupational environmental medicine, there is an element of a patient-physician relationship insofar as when we do manage health of individuals who do become ill or become injured while on the job. But otherwise, there isn't a patient-physician relationship. It's the physician or clinician and employer relationship that really drives the focus of the occupational health delivery. The last point I'll make on this slide, and then I'd like to open it up to any questions that there might be, is that there's much variability within the practice of occupational environmental medicine. So in OEM, uh, practice variability is based on the type of employees whom you see. So if you have folks that are working in a manufacturing plant, let's say that it's a car or motorcycle manufacturing plant, their occupational health needs will be different than perhaps a workforce such as police and firefighters or aviators. And so there is a lot of heterogeneity in the practice for OEM professionals based on the workforces and the elements of the services in which they focus on, whether it is medical surveillance, whether it's assessing individuals to assure that they're fit to do their work, whether it's disability and injury management. There's quite a variety. So I point this out because you may encounter or you may pursue conversations with other occupational medicine specialists in the future. And what you'll learn is that although we have the same fundamental training, the application of our skills and the programs and services that we deliver clinically differ relative to the type of workers and the organizations that we work for. And so that's not so much the case, though, in traditional medicine, where it's largely considered homogeneous. So, where you have a pediatric practice in one location, you can expect similarity in the services provided in another. Same for cardiology, pulmonology, family practice, internal medicine, and the like. So, there's a lot of homogeneity in terms of what medicine is delivered and to whom and why that type of medicine is delivered. So I'll pause there and stop sharing and take any questions that you may have.
Of course, thank you so much, Dr. Mirza. I really appreciate it. I know I learned a lot, and I'm sure students also enjoyed.
Thanks.
Okay. So, we will begin our Q&A session now. We've got a couple of questions in the chat box. Our first question was, if someone had their MPH degree before being accepted to medical school, are they required to do another MPH for occupational medicine?
Yeah, there are requirements germane to the postgraduate education requirements for the medical specialty that are covered in an MPH program, but that are not necessarily universally covered in all MPH programs. So specifically, in the situation where someone comes in with an MPH, they go into the residency, they may not necessarily essentially be exempted from the MPH altogether as part of the residency itself. They may have to take some supplemental courses that are requirements for the medical residency, which are delivered academically through the MPH, for which the candidate who had just matriculated and graduated through an MPH program may not have received in their academic year. So from my limited experience in working with the administrative functions of an MPH program, as I have observed it, particularly within the military, is that if an individual comes into the MPH, there's essentially a method of reconciliation between the MPH degrees that were ascertained, and then that individual will then take what is required for the residency that wasn't covered in the first MPH and assure that that individual has exposure, has experiences in those courses. And then meets the overall program requirement. I'm sure that there is more detail in that in terms of timelines. So, for example, I would not expect that someone that did an MPH 10 or 15 years ago to be able to just go ahead and coast through that element of a residency training program. But the best folks to answer that question is certainly going to be your residency program directors or associate program directors, who would be facilitating your, uh, your training through not only the clinical portions of the program, but also the MPH itself.
That makes sense. Thank you for the info. The same person asked a question regarding the fires. So, like, a fire still engulfs a recycling plant in Dundalk, Maryland, so that raises additional health concerns. Their question is, how would current and discharged service members living in that area with or without pre-existing conditions receive treatment from the VA?
Wow, that's a really that's a really good question. It's a complicated question. So, um, so typically, okay, and if I understand the question correctly, where the question is kind of focused on a general population that may be in the vicinity.
I believe it was about current and discharged service members.
Okay, okay. So, any service members um, that develop illness for which they are living with, that they believe is associated with an event that has occurred during their military service, or agents that they were exposed to in the course of conducting their essential job duties. They are all eligible to apply for VA medical benefit. So if you've ever donned a military uniform, no matter how long it was that you worked in the military, if you are living with a health condition, you may simply go to the VA website and start a claim for any medical condition which you are concerned is associated with an exposure, a hazard, an injury, or an illness that arose as a consequence of that military service. So that's the first step. So in terms of eligibility, if anyone ever wore a uniform, then everyone's eligible to submit claims to the VA for medical conditions. Now, in the situation of a specific exposure, um, the the VA will seek records from, well, the VA will seek records from the claimant on what information they have that supports injury and illness that may arose from exposures that they may have encountered. There's also records that come that are inherent within the personnel records and medical records of individuals that served, whom they will have access to furnish those to the VA. And so leveraging that evidence in tandem with personal attestations about um, what individuals' experiences were while serving will certainly be taken under consideration for a claimed illness in conjunction with service. And so the bottom line is that if anyone's ever served in the military and is concerned that they are living with a health outcome that may have resulted from military activities or their work in the military, they are all eligible to submit a claim for that particular health condition.
That makes sense. Thank you. Another interesting question. How do you envision the role of occupational medicine evolving in the next like 10 to 20 years?
You know, that's a fantastic question. And I don't have a singular great answer for that, except for that what I see evolving is two things. Number one, the manner by which we manufacture goods, the manner in which the industrial complexes in the United States produces material, that is all going to change and evolve as it has done so over the past 100 years. It'll continue to do so into the immediate future, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 20 years from now, in part because there is so much automation integrated into those manufacturing and industrial processes, whereas 40 years ago, that automation may have not existed. So therefore, we were putting workers more closely in front of potentially hazardous situations and or agents. So that evolution has already begun. That evolution will only continue. Now, match that with the second consideration is going to be uh, the adoption and adaptation of artificial intelligence within working environments and how that may subsume the need for actual personnel. I think that's going to have a significant play in terms of who we see in the provision of occupational environmental medicine healthcare, but also we're already recognizing in medicine as a whole, to include occupational environmental medicine, the integration of AI tools, which is also elevating the clinical experience between the clinician, the patient, or worker. And so, I personally think that we are on the precipice of, a huge change in medicine as a consequence of AI. That change is already underway, by the way. And furthermore, I think that's also going to translate to then in the future, um, in the immediate future, how we train medical professionals, physicians, osteopaths, other types of clinicians, as technologies and intelligence enables us greater reliability and precision in medicine. The clinicians that will then interface with patients will also have to adapt to those technologies, and as a consequence, I think that their training and education will also have to adapt. And so I think there's a lot of change coming, but specifically, what are all those changes? When will they occur? Hard to say right now.
That makes sense. Yeah, it's just we got to stick around for the ride to see what happens.
Yeah,
But yeah.
absolutely. What I will say is that you will all be involved in that,
Mhm.
for sure. You will probably hear discussions of changes to medical school curricula, the length of medical school training, the manner in which we test. That is all evolving. Even the manner in which we maintain board certification is changing relative to how it had been for the preceding 50, 60 years. And so everything is evolving now. It's kind of an exciting time because as we are seeing happen today, a change in the way we consume information, a change in the way we educate and train, a change in the way that we assess proficiency, a change in the way that we deliver services. It's exciting to see that um, academic and educational institutions are trying to keep pace, as are individuals that are in the role of healthcare service delivery. The amount of medical innovation that is underway right now is gobsmacking. It's exciting. So you guys will all be a part of that.
Exactly. That's why it's important to get involved now so we don't miss anything and we can contribute to the changes as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So our next question is, how do you address workplace stress or burnout and like mental health in general in workers?
Yeah, that's a good question because I would say and this may not be an opinion universally shared. I would say that the workplace associated psychological impacts are lesser recognized and or potentially dealt with. What I would say is that in recent years, there has been what I would say a growing recognition that workplace environment, workplace demand, that in itself is a stressor or an exposure that impacts personal health. And so where there is growing recognition that uh, there are behavioral health or psychological consequences in certain occupations that need to be treated as an occupational illness. And so I would say is that there is growing recognition of this. There are programs that many employers have to facilitate this. This may be in the course of employee health programs or health promotion programs. I mentioned very briefly about employee assistance programs where this can be dealt with. Many of these programs that contain or that provide services that deal with some of these psychological considerations. There are also confidential programs, and that they're a service that is provided by the employer, but the employer does not necessarily have direct access to, the discussions that are being had with the employee, unless it's determined that what the employee is suffering or living with is going to have a consequence on their ability to continue performing the job. And then, of course, that's kind of dealt with separately. But I hate to say that this is an emerging recognition, that just may be too much of a generalization. I think, though, that there is greater emphasis, greater recognition, perhaps more folks are talking about this as a significant occupational health consequence. And I bring this up because in recent years, particularly since the pandemic, where workplace stress among healthcare workers really became a significant issue. If you remember back to those heightened days where workers were exposed to situations where unprecedented number of individuals will die in their care, where they will work in very long hours, where some of them had to potentially be separated from their families because they were concerned they were going to expose their families to coronavirus. The donning of personal protective equipment elevated for a very long period of time. And what seemed to be a relentless pandemic for well over a year and a half. That certainly induced a lot of psychological stress in the healthcare workforce and in first responders and ancillary professionals that support those health services. And so I think that, in part, as a consequence, is driving greater recognition of the role that workplace stress has on individuals' health, and how the impact on that health then transcends back to workplace productivity and other elements of that individual's life and their personal life and elsewhere. And so I think that we're on the right track on this, and that there's growing recognition and many programs that are dealing with workplace related stressors on the psyche.
Definitely, it's important to prioritize like both mental and physical health because they both influence each other. That's a great answer. Thank you so much. I think we just have a few questions left. You mentioned some research projects in your primary role. What advice would you give to students to be able to get involved with research, and like what's the really significance of research in your field?
Okay, so there's several different forms of research. Okay, so there's research which is very clinically focused. So a lot of folks, when they think about research, clinical trials, for example, clinical trials of novel pharmaceuticals, their impact on that. There are researchers and academicians that focus on specific uh, 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 physiologic systems or enzyme interactions or molecular structures and their impact on physiology. And so there's that type of research. So, for example, looking at one specific genetic loci or locus, or a series of them to identify aberrant changes where cause and relate to which type of disease. So that's usually more of an academic focus area of research. The research which I am now most presently engaged in is public health studies and research. And so there's a gradation of research activities and the types of institutional boards that govern them. So, for example, there are institutional animal use committees for research that involve animals. There are institutional review boards for research that involves humans, and then there's there are offices of health protections which look at the use of information about populations, which are usually rely on de-identified types of data. So in public health studies, oftentimes what we do is we look at groups or populations of individuals and look for the interplay of certain factors and and health outcomes. And those factors we try to provide a level of association of their impact on the health outcome. So, how does one get involved? You get involved by networking with your mentors, with the folks who are educating you, that have their own research labs or have projects which they are conducting on the side. And if you have interest in their type of work, having conversations with them to engage in that work and perhaps contribute to an analysis or collection of data to serve as a go ahead.
Sorry, I think that was background noise.
Oh, okay. To serve as a co-author or an investigator. But in my experience, um, I I have um, I have I've noted that uh, researchers in general that are tied to an academic institution will always invite and encourage students to participate, to learn about the research process, um, everything from writing a proposal to completing a manuscript. And so I think that it's very easy for a student in an undergrad, graduate medical school setting to find a mentor who is willing to take on them as a project researcher. It's just building those relationships and making the connection and letting that educator know that you do have interests and you'd like to explore if there's an opportunity to engage. I think it's really that simple.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you for the detailed answer. I'm sure a lot of students were able to note some things down. So yeah, I think our last question for today is, what advice would you give someone considering a career in occupational environmental medicine?
What advice would I give them? I don't know if this is advice or if this is perspective. I I could never have expected my current career experiences or my career experiences over the last 10 years, 15 years almost. When I graduated from medical school, I did not know what was occupational environmental medicine. Never heard of it. Um, I slowly learned about it during the start of my residency, and consequently uh, ended up with an OEM residency. But if you're starting out in OEM, I think the best advice is first focus on learning as much as you can about the medical specialty, and the public health programs and the public health functions of the medical specialty in your training. Um, After that, there is such tremendous variation in how one can practice occupational and environmental medicine. That is what is really exciting. So, for example, I would have never thought I would sit on Capitol Hill and provide testimony to senators and House representatives. I never thought I would be sitting with secretaries of executive departments. I never thought I would be in the middle of Iquitos or Honduras during, engaging in public health issues. Uh, I I never thought that these experiences were even a possibility for physicians in terms of how deeply they can get involved in health policy, how deeply they can get involved in project management and medical guidance generation. My thought was medicine always followed a traditional paradigm, which was you sit in a clinic or work in a hospital and you're taking care of patients. And that is a noble profession. It's an essential profession, but that's what I thought physicians did. And um, what occupational and environmental medicine and preventive medicine both have taught me is that there is tremendous variability. And so anyone who's aspiring or thinking about would OEM be for me, what I would say is this: there's great positive variability in the medical specialty. You know, sometimes I think that folks may say, well, too much variability makes it a little bit challenging to understand what it is that you do. But what I would say is that the variability is the possibility and opportunity that comes in your career. Um, the other thing I would say is that for OEM specialists, the lifestyle, the life and work balance is phenomenal. Um, I would also say that if you're thinking about, well, what about salaries and the like? I would say that occupational medical specialists are paid competitively and paid well, oftentimes more so than folks that are working in primary care. And, and with that, um, I would say is that if this is your first time hearing about OEM, um, reach out and look for mentors. Contact me. Uh, Go to the American College of Occupational and Environmental Medicine. Talk to a military doctor. Many of them have worked as general medical officers or flight medicine officers, all of whom provide certain occupational medical functions. Uh, I think the more that folks learn about this medical specialty, the more interested they are. Um, the last thing I'll say about this specialty in reference to the question is that with so much variability, there's there's very limited to no monotony in the practice. I find that each day that I go to work, um, I start with a frame of reference of what I want my day to look like, and it's usually something completely different. And it's a good thing. I find that the specialty is challenging. There's academic rigor behind it. But I find that it's also very gratifying professionally, financially. And so again, if this is your first time hearing about it, look at the American College of Occupational Environmental Medicine. The American Osteopathic Association also has an association for general preventive medicine and occupational medicine. There are a lot of us out here that would be very happy to mentor, to answer more questions. And so if there's interest, keep on researching it. I think you will find that this medical specialty is so varied in what you can do as a practicing provider, as a licensed provider, that there's really never a dull moment.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much, Dr. Mirza. Those are all of our questions we had for today. We'd love everyone to please give a warm thank you for this awesome session. Yeah, and I've linked the American College of no, American College of Occupational and Environmental Medicine in our email that goes out to every student. So hopefully everyone checks that out. It's been going out for a month now, so hopefully we've got clicks on that. So yeah, thank you so much. Now
Okay.
we're going to conduct our closing session with our quiz and future session dates. So the link to the quiz for the session will be live soon. Again, you'll need a 70% or higher to pass and receive certification. And now on to our next session dates. These dates are always posted on our social media outlets, so be sure to follow us at TeleShadowing everywhere. Our next session will be next Saturday, February 1st at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Thank you so much, everyone, for attending today's session, and we hope to see you in upcoming sessions as well. This concludes this week's shadowing. Thank you.